2022 regular Board of Education meeting to order. Nikki, would you call the roll, please?
Certainly, Nikki Austin is present. Dan Bardoff.
Present.
Rich Depre.
Present.
Terry Ellison.
Present.
Teresa Keen.
Present.
Cheryl McGuire.
Here.
Dylan McGuire. Phil Vosberg.
Here.
Tim Wolf.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum and we are in session. Entertain a motion to approve the agenda or amend it. Hang on. What is the motion?
I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda by moving item B under new business. Approval of Jeremy Jackson as MHS principal to become item 13, approval of Jeremy Jackson as MHS principal.
So the first one.
So the first one, yep. So,
Dan, you want to
Second.
Dan, okay. We got a motion by Cheryl and a second by Dan to amend the agenda as described. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. I'd now entertain a motion to approve the amended agenda for this evening.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Phil and a second by Tim. By voice vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Okay. Onto the consent agenda. Any board member wish to remove a consent item for individual consideration? Hearing none, we'll read them into the record. We're approving minutes, Board of Education, February 14th, 2022. Approval of receipts and expenditures, January 22. Approval of support staff resignation, Jamie Southers, Parkside Educational Assistant. Approval of support staff hiring, Janessa Newingham, Middle School LMC Assistant. Alyssa Marson, High School Custodian. Juanita Cutler, High School Custodian. Genevieve Kundert, Parkside Educational Assistant. Brandy Harris, Parkside Educational Assistant. Approval of support staff voluntary transfer, Zachary Zimmerman from Parkside Custodian to Middle School Custodian. Approval of professional staff hiring, Chris Carr, High School Physical Education. Approval of professional staff voluntary transfer, Hannah Ormson from elementary Spanish to high school ELL teacher. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Nikki and a second by Terry. By voice vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Okay, we have nobody registered for public comment. Is anybody here for the purpose of making public comment? Okay. No old business. We are on to new business. Our first item will be discussion and possible approval of recommendation for updated COVID-19 guidelines. So as a reminder, this one's a new item with possible board action. I'll recap the current state of COVID for the board. As of today, we've got an average of 2.4 new cases per day for the school district of Monroe. So 2.4 is a 7-day rolling average, down from a peak of 49.4 on January 20th. It's the lowest level since August 21st and has dropped to about a third of what it was 6 days ago. Data for the county, we're at 4.86 per day, down from a peak of 104.3 on January 20th. This is also the lowest level since August 11th. And again, another drop by about a third of what the average was 6 days ago. Greene County, per Wisconsin DHS, is currently at a very high burden of 519, down from a peak of 3,428 on January 25th. Based on the trend in the last 5 days for the county numbers, it's possible we could transition to high this Wednesday. Greene County vaccination rates are largely unchanged, 65% having the first dose, 62% completing the course. No statistics are being provided by SSM Monroe Clinic at this time. Current COVID positive in the district, we have 4 students positive. This is down from a high of 103 on January 14th and 5 quarantines. We have no staff positive or in quarantine. So clearly a marked reduction in cases after the Omicron surge brought the highest COVID activity levels we'd seen since the start of the pandemic. And again, just to recognize the efforts of our staff to keep our doors open and our school in session, can't say how much we appreciate those efforts. And our focus continues to be on maintaining in-person learning. And at this point, we're going to look forward as COVID becomes more of a endemic situation, and our administration and health team want to discuss some possible changes to our current protocols. I'm going to turn it over to Joe to lead that discussion.
Great summary. It saved me from having to go over a lot of that information, so well done. As Rich mentioned, we're at 4 today. We're feeling really good. I'll take this opportunity to again say thanks to Sam. He's hiding in the back corner there, kind of, and her team, not to mention the countless teachers and principals who've done an outstanding job. January was tough. I think everyone's aware of the numbers that we were dealing with. And, you know, on January 14th, when we were looking at 103 positive cases, we weren't sure where this was going to go. And to be at 4 today feels really, really good. So we're appreciative that we've gotten to this point. The reason we wanted to share some thoughts with you today is that the reality is the practices around our district, meaning mostly in our county, have changed. I think everyone's aware that Greene County Health is no longer conducting contact tracing. They've redirected their efforts and their resources to vaccination clinics and testing efforts. And the school districts in our county around us are no longer contact tracing either. And we're at a point now where I think we've been more cautious than some of the other districts in the county. And we used the last couple weeks to see how our numbers played out. And even though we've removed the masking mandate, our numbers have remained pretty low over the last couple weeks. We've hovered around 6 positive cases on a daily rate. So we feel good about that. Last week, Todd and I, Ron was gonna meet with us, but unfortunately he wasn't able to be there. Met with Sam and the health assistant team to talk a little bit about their experience and get some feedback from them as far as what they think would be appropriate in terms of next steps, given where we're at with COVID and our current numbers. And we had a good conversation. I think they really valued the opportunity to be heard and chat a little bit about what we think might be next. And what we're about to share with you is largely coming from that group and is supported by administration. So I'd like to run through a few things that we would like to recommend to the board for your consideration regarding our COVID guidelines going forward. First is the health assistants felt that it was probably appropriate and necessary to discontinue contact tracing at this time. They were quick to recognize that contact tracing has put a significant strain on them as a team, in addition to the school office staff. It's been challenging. One of the challenges has been that given where we're at with the Omicron variant, typically by the time we become aware of someone that needs to be considered for contact tracing, we're usually 2 to 3 days behind. And due to that progression, the response is often later than what would be ideal. So that's been a concern. In addition, given some of the changes that have happened within the county recently, the community response has at times been negative when they have reached out in efforts to conduct contact tracing. And I think that's taken its toll. And Sam, I'd invite you to jump in at any time if I'm not capturing the spirit of what was said, or if you'd like to add to anything. Anything you want to share related to that, Sam?
No, that's very accurate.
So that's certainly taken its toll on the team. Obviously, we know that this has been a difficult task all along, but certainly given the fact that the county is no longer conducting contact tracing and people are well aware that other school districts are no longer conducting contact tracing, that's resulted in some negative responses. We would like to continue to provide notice of exposure. So if there is someone who's identified as positive within the district and they were in the schools during their infectious period, we would certainly notify families, parents of potential exposure, and that would be done via email. And in addition to that, we would offer voluntary COVID testing for those that would like to get tested and checked out to see if they potentially would test positive. One thing that the team felt strongly about, which is a little bit different from what other districts are doing, is we do still feel that it's important to identify household contacts. So as those individuals that are sharing a household with those that have been identified as COVID positive, we feel that they need to be treated a little bit differently because we've seen a high rate of individuals who are living in homes with COVID positive individuals who have eventually become positive. And we wanted to make sure that we're monitoring and taking extra precautions with those individuals. So what we've indicated is that individuals that reside in a household with an individual that has tested positive would be subjected to quarantine. We would recommend this regardless of vaccination status because we've seen it for both those who are vaccinated and unvaccinated. We would ask those folks to quarantine for 10 days after symptoms were first reported, although they would have the opportunity to participate in the Test to Stay program. And those details were listed below, but basically it's, we would ask individuals to receive 3 consecutive negative tests, and then ultimately they wouldn't need to continue the testing. But we would ask that they wear a mask for the 10-day period in order to successfully complete that program.
Could they test on day one and stay? Or do they have to wait a certain?
No, yeah, they can test on day one. We would ask for 3 consecutive tests. We had a lot of discussion around that, right, Sam? Do you want to talk about the rationale behind that?
Yeah, we did. If I find out today, my child A is positive and, I want to start my 3-day of my child B, we're like, ooh, that is really, really close. But we know also that most of the time when we're finally diagnosing and finding these COVID positive kids, that they've been around their siblings and potentially their classmates, but their siblings and in homes for 2-3 days prior to even knowing they're sick. So we felt confident and pretty comfortable starting in on that Test to Stay right away that we would capture them. Omicron and what we've got for variants right now are really different than the original variants we had too. So we're seeing that turnaround of people who are going to get sick, typically get sick pretty quickly. So we felt like, we were likely to catch them. And just because you're back to school with a mask and you've tested negative 3 days in a row, doesn't mean that on, day 8, you come in coughing and hacking and blowing your nose, that we're not going to call your parent and say, hey, I really think we need to test again. So we've always got that option too.
I think this is another, I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit here. I think this is another example of how we've learned a lot over the last 2 years, and we've tried to evolve in our thinking. And Sam has been great at being flexible and responsive as we have learned more. And I think this is a great example of that. And I think one of the things I probably should have mentioned at the front end, much of this has been based on the idea that we want to minimize learning loss. We recognize that we have a lot of kids that have missed a lot of school as a result of close contacts and quarantines. And while that was absolutely necessary in order to ensure the safety for our students and staff, there were a lot of things that we didn't know. We're in a better place now and we know more. And ultimately, if we want our kids to learn, we need them to be in school, and we need to take every step we can in order to ensure that our kids are in school as much as possible. So that was it for household contacts. A couple other quick things, and then we can open it up for discussion. I think one of the things that was really important to emphasize is that we like the overall structure of the plan that was developed. We think it makes sense to continue to have a regular default plan, but also have a heightened COVID response plan. So if we do see a surge again, as we did in January, we have a plan in place that can respond and ultimately provide some mitigation strategies to get us back on track and keep kids in school and keep our doors open. So everyone felt very strongly about that. And then as usual, anytime we put together a recommendation or make any kind of decision, COVID has a way of introducing new information. So we wrote this up, sent it to Cindy on Thursday. On Friday, the CDC made their announcement about masks on the bus and basically indicated that their new guidance no longer considers schools a unique category. And as a result, schools are free to make a determination about whether or not masks are required on the bus. Ron did reach out to Denise at the bus garage. She didn't have any objections at this point, and so what we would probably add to this recommendation is that the masking requirement on the bus mirrors or reflects what is being done in the schools. So at this point, I'll open it up for conversation. I recognize that the board, likely has some feedback and there's a lot of thoughts, and we've had 2 years of working through this. So we're certainly open to any questions or modifications that you would propose.
A little question around your notice of exposure. If you're not contact tracing, how are you gonna notify of exposure?
So are you nodding at me like you want to answer? Do you?
Doesn't matter, I can.
Oh, okay.
So in the elementary level, that would still be classroom notification like we did in the HCRP plan. Middle school and high school level, we would probably pull the schedule of the positive student and email it out to those classrooms.
Like your bus example or some of those things.
The bus is probably a punt. And, we've talked about that before, back when we were contact tracing and considering buses. A lot of our kids aren't on the bus for a super long period of time. But yeah, that's just gonna be one of those places that we're gonna punt as far as the busing goes. But otherwise, notification will be by classroom.
So just looking at that workload with the case count, I mean, does it really change it that much?
Yeah, actually a lot. So by pulling classrooms, we're not pulling individual kids. So we're avoiding having to find time in the day to talk to the teacher about how long, student A was in contact with all of these people. And then double checking attendance, because sometimes, teachers would give us their seating chart and it wouldn't be specific to that student or that day. So it's a little more blanketed instead of individual.
Joe, can you do a quick, brief summary of the changes that you're proposing? We've got contact tracing will not happen anymore. Buses will be optional.
Yep, so it would be discontinue contact tracing. Rather than doing the individual contact tracing, we would provide those notice of exposures via email. We would continue to quarantine household contacts, but the way in which we did that would also involve the test to stay program, which ultimately would require, 3 negative tests and then masking through day 10. And then finally, we would also make the recommendation that masking mirror what's going on in the schools. So just quickly, that's the total of the changes that are being recommended.
How do you feel about 4K and masking?
I mean, we've tried hard to, justify our response, and our response was always that we're gonna mask until you have the option to be vaccinated. Up until a few weeks ago, it sounded like Pfizer was moving forward and asking for permission to move ahead with vaccinations for our 4-year-olds, and they've since, pulled that back and are gonna wait a while. I was totally on board a few weeks ago that, yep, we're gonna get our, our friends in here in our pharmacies and, whoever wants to be vaccinated, and hopefully by the end of the year, they would be gone, kind of following the same process that we had before. It's looking much more unlikely that that will happen now. But I think our little people also do a fantastic job of wearing their masks, and they don't know school any different either. So, yeah, I can't.
No, I mean, I don't know where I stand on it. I mean, but we all hear about how that affects learning and communication skills and mental health. I didn't want to forget about them. Is the nature of my question.
Yeah, I think I would add that, certainly Sam referenced that it makes sense for us to operate from a rationale and a point that's defensible. And our position has always been, let's give kids and families the opportunity to access the vaccine. And once they've had ample time to do so, then we would allow people to have choice. At this point, we didn't touch that because we felt that's been the board's position. Certainly, the board can make a determination as to what you'd like to do. I would like to see us at some point, whether it be now or in the summer, move towards removing masks for our youngest learners, because I do think as you're looking at language development, academic development, social interaction, the mask does have play a bit of a limiting factor on those little ones. They do great, they handle it. Our 4K staff and early childhood staff are wonderful at reminding the little guys to keep their masks on. As you can imagine, it's a bit challenging sometimes, but they do a nice job. But I think all of us have the goal of moving towards school without masks unless it's necessary.
Do we know if our 4K partners have changed their procedures or perspective on masking 4K children at this point?
I haven't been a part of any of those conversations. Have you heard
No,
anything?
I think they're, kind of aware, and I think, as we mentioned before, I think some of them have different, I guess, some are following us because it's our rules, some of them have different rules based upon their facilities and the requirements, and so certainly like Dane County Head Start is going to, short run, still be following what Dane County rules are, because that's what they have to do. Some for other providers are, yes, in their environment, they're requiring them, and other ones are probably would not be requiring them if we were not, so.
What about the surrounding districts, Ron, for 4K?
Honestly, don't know. In the 4K, Joe probably talks to the superintendents more than I do.
Yeah, no one's indicated that they have a 4K masking mandate in place. I think we're the only ones. Largely speaking, from the conversations that I'm having in weekly meetings or emails that go out, people have dropped the masking mandate and they're no longer contact tracing. Now, I don't want to propose that as that's the reason or the rationale why we should make a change, but it gives you the context of the world we're living in right now.
Sam, can you just give us a little update on the test to stay? I mean, at one point, we were really iffy and we had enough tests and stuff like that. Are we doing okay? Is there a lot of people testing? Probably not anymore, I would imagine, but.
We are, because we had a couple positives in school last week, so we're, still doing that test to stay and those household contacts. Right now, we let, siblings test out after 5 days of quarantine on day 6. So, some days there's a couple students and some days there's almost 20. It's really flexed. This will probably, I would imagine, change a little bit of how much we're seeing with test to stay, but we're very fortunate. We have plenty of tests right now. So we don't see that as an issue at all. With this, we also recognize that moving forward with this plan, it doesn't matter if you're vaccinated or not. And up until now, if you've been vaccinated, you're kind of exempt. We recommend you wear a mask, but otherwise you're exempt. So this is bringing back around people who are vaccinated. So I'm kind of looking at a break even as far as the number of students and staff. We're probably gonna have more staff participating in test to stay too, by including those vaccinated individuals.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? So I guess in the way I see it, looking at precautions and the associated impacts on learning that have been described, I think aligning those to meet our goals of in-person learning, balancing safety, presence and choice, I think it's an appropriate incremental step that's been proposed. We also don't know what lies ahead, so I think it's wise to keep the HCRP protocols in place and the policy just in case we need them. So I would be supportive of the changes recommended by administration.
I'm supportive of the changes too. I just, I don't know how anyone feels about the 4K thing though. I mean, does anybody have any thoughts on that? I mean, how they feel one way or the other?
I'm struggling with it a little.
Yeah, I guess I am too.
I mean, I know we've said until they have choice, but at the same time, I worry about their learning and just all the stuff that we need to see when we're little, when we're forming words and I don't know.
I mean, I agree with what Nikki's saying. I mean, on the flip side of the coin is, consistency too. I think Joe referenced that.
The one thing we might want to look at is, so under the new CDC guidelines, right, there, a lot of it is based on the hospital. So right now, all of our surrounding counties except for Greene is in a situation where the CDC is not recommending that you need to require a mask. So we may want to keep an eye on that. I believe if I've got the data correct, I think maybe by end of the week, we would be out of that. Potentially, based on what I've seen,
Can
so.
you say that again, Tim, that all the surrounding counties, so we're worse off than surrounding counties?
No,
or
we're
better
the
off?
only ones that.
That's correct. We're the only high county.
Right, correct.
Oh,
All the other
everybody else
counties
is
around
lower
us
than us.
Are,
Yeah, Dane County is
Correct.
low, Rock County is
Dane
moderate.
County's the lowest, yep. Dane and Lafayette and Rock are moderate. I just looked it up.
Critically high for a while.
But keep in mind, now it's not based on case count per 100,000 and those things, it's based on the burden in the hospital rates. So they look at total number of admissions and total number of into the hospital, so that's what's driving our numbers.
well, and plus Dane
So-
County has all these hospitals, right?
Correct.
So
Right,
that
correct.
adds
That's-
to that, right?
Yeah.
Correct. But it might be something to look at as that drops, which I think it will. Then, to me, that makes a good opportunity to do that.
To drop it for the littles, okay. Because that'd be, I guess, another thing I'm thinking, and maybe it's not for tonight's discussion, but, maybe can we look back and maybe we don't even have the data for it, but what is the transmission rate at that little level? And also the, when they're getting it, even if they're positive, are they getting sick or are they not? I just hate to see them.
So one thing that I think has served us well is that we've taken cautious proximal steps along the way. And I think everything that you're saying right now makes sense. I think what we could do for the next board meeting is, between Sam and myself, take a close look at our data for our 4K EC kiddos, see what our transmission rate has looked like, see what those numbers have been over time, have some conversations with those teachers to get some feedback, because I think people appreciate when we're able to reach out to them and get that feedback and then report back to the next meeting and give you all some additional information so you can make that determination.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
I think that's a good idea.
And maybe by
I
then,
agree.
like Tim said, we'll be in a level where
I think
makes
that
us
makes a
all
lot
feel
of
better
sense.
too.
Yeah.
Excellent. Any additional
So
discussion?
we need to.
Yep, we'll need a motion and a second on this if there's not any additional.
And I just want to make sure, well, we haven't made a motion yet, but your recommendation also will include the bus thing, right?
Yes.
As it's written
It
out,
wasn't
that's-
written up because we submitted it on Thursday. The CDC changed their guidance on Friday. But as a part of our recommendation that we're giving you tonight, it would include that busing follows the rules as they are in place for the buildings, the schools.
Okay, so I'd be looking for a motion to approve the updated COVID-19 guidelines as presented by Joe Monroe, Director of Pupil Services, which includes the modifier to the buses.
I'll move.
Second.
Motion by Phil and a second by Terry. By voice vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to item C. B has been moved until later for action. So this one's a continuation, it's a referendum and facilities referendum discussions, continuation of our previous discussions on the possible facilities referendum that we've been talking about. No action planned for this evening, but if it feels like we're arriving at a consensus, what we'd do is we'd instruct administration to engage with our legal team to begin drafting question language that would then come back before the board for approval. So questions for the board to consider, a little context. After the positive survey results we received would be, are we comfortable moving forward to the community to instruct us how to proceed on the November ballot this year? So would we want to put a question on the November ballot to remind us all it was a $88 million total cost option that was seen favorably in the survey to build a new high school on a new site that equated to roughly $206 per year per 100,000 assessed value would be the impact to the taxpayers, and resulting mill rate still lower than it was 5 years ago in the 17-18 school year. So tonight we've got our contractor, C.G. Schmidt, and our architect Plunkett Racich here with us to answer any questions we might have about the proposed project. And this would be a large ask of our community, so I think it's deserving of some of our time to discuss, and on our part as well as ample time to provide the community for planning and to inform the community of the needs. So I'm going to turn it over to administration to make any additional comments before we discuss whether or not we'd like to move forward.
Yeah, so basically, just to remind everyone, there was some, they had a breakout of, where our support was from various levels last month. But as a whole, on the survey results, there was basically 63% of respondents said that they would support either the new high school and or both, right, options. And so obviously that was the overwhelming leader of the two options we put out, but also it shows that there was a lot of support out there within the community for the consideration for the project. As Rich said, we've spent, or Rich didn't say, but we've spent a long time getting here, right? We started this process back in 2017. Decided it was a little too quick for us to come to this decision in 2018. So we were aiming for 2020. As we know, COVID broke out in the spring of 2020, and we decided not to ask for a high school question at that time. And so that's why we're back here doing the survey and considering for 2022. We didn't lose out in the interim. In 2018, we decided to move forward with the question for Parkside, and we upgraded all the infrastructure in Parkside, all the mechanical systems. Also did some, you have all the ceilings and stuff out. We did some ceilings and painting and things of that nature, but all the mechanicals got updated. In 2020, when we decided not to go to the community, we asked the same question then for Northside. Some of that work got done last summer. The remainder is getting done this summer. At Northside, we also added roofing and siding to that project, and in both those projects included updating our bathrooms to make them ADA accessible. We also did the middle school bathrooms with the Parkside project. So we haven't not lost ground, right? We haven't been stalled waiting to get to this point. But I think when this committee started, this wasn't necessarily the focal point of having that study. The study was just a facility study and to see what we needed to do to address our buildings. But this quickly became, the high school quickly became the number one concern for that facility committee. And so it has been another, 5 years almost of that building kind of waiting. And so I think there's a need to address the building, certainly. And I think part of the question was, did the community want us to address the building and make repairs and continue the building as what it is, knowing that, 20 years plus years ago, there was some, investments put into that building. And I think the survey results came back pretty clearly that, I think they're, given the fact one option was 86 million and one option was 88 million, I think the part of what was our community's decision-making factor, I'm guessing, is the fact that putting money into a building where parts of the building would be 70-plus years old when we were completed versus having a new building, I think had to be part of the consideration that our community had. And so I think as we hopefully work through this next meeting or two, deciding if, we're going to follow some of the guidance that we received from the community in the survey. If we are, as Rich said, we will then engage our legal. We'll get a proposed resolution to the board, and then the board could act on that. And then that would be the question that would go to the community in the fall. And so there is some timing. I know a lot of you have worked on this for a long time, and there was some hope that maybe we could have this resolution and know what the question is, prior to the April election, just because, Dan's been working on this a long time. Dan's going off the board. And obviously we knew we wanted to go there, and we wanted to give ourselves a lot of time to educate our community. So a lot of referendums only have a couple of months to inform their community what they're looking to do. And so for us to have basically from May through November to get information out to our community will certainly be a help if we know that this is what we want to do. And so we'll open up to questions to all of the committee here, as far as not the committee, but to Dan, Sarah, and Steve as well, to any questions that we might have.
So the question I have is, when we how fresh are the cost data? I mean, I don't remember when we did that, those numbers, right?
Yeah.
Are we?
Dan looked at those numbers before we went out to survey, and obviously, we're in a dynamic era right now, but I think we had you lay your eyes on those as recently as November.
Yeah, so we did look at those numbers. So right now, as everyone knows, everything's at its peak for material pricing and things like that. The good thing with this one is that it would be a November referendum. By the time design would be finished or completed and it would go out to bid, it's gonna be a year and a half. There's gonna be an opportunity for things, the market to correct itself and stabilize a little bit. What we did put on those numbers was normal inflation. So it's like 3 to 5%. We're seeing much higher than that right now on different material. It is one thing that we've been looking at for some of the November referendums, and we're gonna look at this one again too, just to make sure it's adequate. But I think we feel like, because we have time on our side, we have some opportunities for things to kind of, I don't think this is sustainable, what it's doing right now. So it's going to correct itself. It may not get to where it was pre-pandemic, but it should come down, so.
Thank you.
Well, and that was my question too. Are the numbers reasonably fresh? Because the survey went out with a number.
Mhm.
And a follow-up question is land purchase included in that?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And the other area that is obviously inching up a little on us is interest rates. We're still well under what was proposed or projected for the cost side of the interest rate for this. And there's enough insulation in there that we should be fine come this fall. Even though it's incrementing up a little bit, the good news is for the public borrowing for 20 years, it's been so low for the last 3-4 years that even an increase still puts us at what would have been a 20-year low 3 years ago, right? And so there's never, other than, I guess if we would have went in 2020, in hindsight, there's never been a greater bang for the buck as far as for when you start paying off the building over the course of 20 years, based upon what the interest rates are.
Any additional thoughts or questions?
Timeline wise, if we go to referendum in November, what would be the timeline from, passing referendum question to moving into a new high school?
Yeah, so we had put some schedules together, and so there's a design period that would occur after that, and that's probably 9 months to a year, to be fair with that, because it's a big, pretty significant project. So we'd go through that, so that would take us, towards the end of 2023. You know, if a referendum's in November of 22, that would take us through at some point in, you know, in 23. And then we'd have to determine when would be the best time to start construction, in the fall of 23, or do you wait till the spring of 24? Avoid, you know, starting construction during winter. We can build through winter, that's not an issue. But we would look at all that, or if there's potentially some early bid packages that we could get out there, like a footings and foundations package, and start a little sooner. But then we're looking probably at about, this one, I think we had about 18 months or so of construction once we started to get it complete. I think, you know, if it ends up being, you know, a new building on a new site, that can go a little quicker than if we were to do a phase, you know, a combination of additions and renovations at the high school. That would take longer, just because we'd have to keep the high school, you know, operational and do things in phases. So that would probably be more of a 2-year project if we would look at doing that.
So the new school on a new site would fall of 25, the occupancy then?
Yeah, that would, yeah, I think we could, let's see, 23, 24, yes. Yes. Absolutely.
And yeah, and I would say that's probably the realistic or worst case, most
Let's
likely.
do the worst case, I would say, and I think would be nice about that is we could probably get it done in that summer of 25, right? I'm thinking, not talking about these years, it's funny to hear, but yeah, 25, and it would give some time then, you know, to move in over that summer, because, you know, moving in furniture and equipment and getting all the teachers and faculty, you know, adjusted to the new building, so that would give plenty of time to do that too.
Yeah, I know Dan said that there are some districts that are moving mid-year, and I think we would hope to not do that. So if it was done that spring or something, that certainly gives us a little more time. Now, the good news is if it's a new building, new site, you know, some of that stuff can be moving in, you know, so you're not bringing over, if we are fortunate enough to get to that point in time. I think the other thing, will be, you know, get to, you know, Steve's, which I'm glad Dan's giving you a little more time now, because
Yes, that's good.
before, I think Dan was doing foundations in the spring, but I would say if part of the building, design is done, as Dan said, I think if you could get some of those footings and foundations done before the ground's frozen, then that certainly gives you a jump start on some of the next.
Once we know further details, then we can put a phasing plan in place. And as Ron's saying, do some packages to get things started to be as most economical as possible.
Is part of that, the 88 million or whatever it is, 86, whatever it is, also include tearing down the current high school after the fact?
Right.
Or are we stuck with a building now too?
There was a dollar amount in there to take it back to a green space.
Yeah, it
Now,
would,
if we do something else with it, then we'd have to.
exactly. It would just be demoing the building, kind of an empty lot, and, you know,
There is a number in there.
yes.
We could choose to do whatever we want, I mean, right? From
'Cause I-
green space to continue to use it or somewhere in between.
Yeah, so at a minimum, it would take it back to being a green space, and which we then could maintain, or we could sell, or we could do whatever with, right? But if there was if someone came forth and said, you know, we want the pack or something, we would have to see, is it even feasible or something to consider that, and that would be down the road to consider.
I think because some people are curious about that too, I think. So like if you demo it, it could be part of it or the whole thing or.
Yeah.
'Cause
But
I know a lot of people like sentimental value, or old gym too. And there's not a lot of old gyms around, I hear. They like it, you know, and stuff like that too. I don't know if you could do something with part of that.
Yeah, so if we were to look at that, it would really take like a nonprofit or another organization who was really, made an assertion to us that they wanted it, and B, could prove that they had the wherewithal to make it go, right? Because the worst thing, you don't want, but I think what the other side of the issue is, you have a lot of people say, we don't want a building standing there unused, right? And so you have to balance those two a bit.
So overall, the survey was supportive, if I recall, it was.
60%.
I mean, it wasn't a home run.
It's a pretty,
But I think
and I
if you,
think,
if you took the people that were in, considered option one, if they have just option two,
They would run it.
right, that probably, because those people probably see the need, but maybe thought that was a better option, so maybe they would come over, and then there's some that said that they would consider both, right, so you'll probably
They would migrate.
Well, I thought the perception guy said it was pretty close, around 50%. That's your chance, you know, but you can
But I recall him
promote
saying
it
that
and
too,
make it more people to
that
come.
if choices were limited, they would
Yep.
migrate to.
Yeah.
So
I think school perceptions has a pretty well-established methodology. They're pretty good at what they do. I don't think that they would have recommended that we take it to the voters if they thought that there was an opportunity, a larger opportunity that it could fail than it would pass.
well,
So,
that's kind of like what happened post, like pre-pandemic, when they said, you know, this, like right now, this doesn't, it's not gonna pass.
right. So in the past, they have
That's what
told
they
us
said.
that
Yeah.
it's
They'll take,
Most districts are just over that 50% mark usually,
That's,
Yeah.
you know, so it
Where
takes a
you
lot
are.
of hard work, so I think 63 is a pretty high
yeah,
percentage.
it's a great starting spot to be at, I would say, you know. We work with school perceptions in a couple of districts, and I know Sarah's worked with them a lot, they do great work. And I think they do a really good job of, if they don't think it'll pass, they'll tell you that, right?
right.
I don't think you're ever gonna have school perceptions, even if 90% of the community also, they supported some school perceptions would never come out and say, this is gonna pass, right? They're always gonna say, well, you know, because there are a lot of things that can happen in the interim, and so, you know, I think what you heard from them is what they usually will say, that, you know, there's a lean toward positive. They'll tell you if they don't think that lean exists.
Well, I think you have to look at both the surveys, right, and show that the second one is significantly better, right?
That's
And I
good.
think it was significantly better in the non-staff, non-parent category, which is really, that category is probably the most important that we would have to address anyways. I think those numbers are encouraging. And I think proper education hopefully can push that. There's always gonna be a certain portion, whatever, 30% or whatever number that is, it's gonna say no. There's always gonna be a certain portion that say yes, in that middle category where you gotta educate and hopefully convince them, him or her, that to do it, so. I think it's a no-brainer that we move forward, myself. I think we have to. Like I said, I've been on it a long time, and high school has been priority number one, and, well, what we did in Northside and Parkside, I think we needed to do, and I think it was smart. But man, now we can't keep not addressing at high school. If the voters say no, then we come back maybe with something else or whatever, but we have to start addressing the high school, and we have to ask the electors what they want to do with that building.
I think that was good said. I
Yeah,
agree.
I agree. I couldn't agree
We
more
have
with
to.
the way you said that, Tim.
I mean, I think our kids and our community deserve it. I think we owe it to them and to ask and to see. And I get that it's a big ask. It absolutely is a big ask. But again, I think our kids deserve it and our community deserves it. For at least for us to put the question out there and see where we're at. And I guess it's not a question, but I just really, and they're not here, but I really, really want to say thank you to the facilities committee who has worked since, 2000?
A lot longer than many of them thought they were
Right, they've been a
Yeah.
huge committee and done a ton of work and looked at so much information to
Yeah.
kind of boil this down for us. And so I'm so incredibly appreciative and really value their work in this too, and their opinion as they've, and you guys, yes, absolutely.
The other question I perceived is just the land itself, so we think there's something that's available that if it passes, or at least a couple options.
There's, I think, a couple parcels out there, one that I know is available, you know, it's a question of if the price that they want is the price that we want to live with, or where, you know, that could work itself out to be. And then there's a couple other properties that we certainly are interested in, that we haven't had any conversations with those folks yet. So I'm hoping between those, you know, 4 to 6 properties that we would find somewhere that we can land. Obviously, they'll know we're looking at a project, they know we need land, so there's gonna be some price inflation in there for some people maybe, and for other people, maybe not. I mean, some people are, maybe looking and interested in, the good of the community too, right? So I think, we'll see where some of that shakes out. But we can start having some of those conversations once we know this is where we're going.
Any additional questions or conversation? I'm getting a feeling that we would instruct the administration to move forward with preparing language for us to get ready to ask a question based on option 2.
Yes, I'll talk to the legal and see if they're, hopefully they'll maybe have a draft, for our next meeting, and then certainly whether we act on it then or on the 28th. 28th was the February date. It's the 11th and the 25th, I believe it is, in March. So, yes, I can work with them and get a question out for you guys to look at, and then hopefully have it finalized by the end of March. Thank you guys for coming out.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for being here.
You too.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're on to informational items. Just double check to make sure we got. That's not the right window. That's the right window. Okay, the only, let's see, boardsmanship, just a reminder, the scholarship committee selection, you guys are meeting Friday, March 11th, 8:30 a.m. Terry and Teresa will be representing the board. Anything from administration?
I have a couple quick things. We have a special board meeting tomorrow night. Just quickly, by show of hands, how many of you intend to be there, so we know we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We're good. We'll take Cheryl's a half, so we're good for tomorrow. Dan, you're clear?
All right, thanks.
Have fun.
Rowdy.
You're not going?
I got an opportunity to do something.
He's got a family obligation.
He's guaranteeing a win at the Kohl Center tomorrow night. And then just the second thing is, I heard this from countless staff members today. Thank you to the board for all the support and what you've done to lift their spirits and take care of them, especially Teresa, all your coordination efforts. They are genuinely appreciative of the show of support by the board, so thank you for that. It's done a lot to lift their spirits.
It was fun being in there and seeing the staff also.
It was. A lot of good conversations.
I'd share that we did have our initial conversation with Hazard Young Atia, and I talked about some of the focus groups and getting those scheduled, and so I had a follow-up conversation with them today, and then Cindy and I are going to circle back with them tomorrow to try and finalize some of those dates and times for some of those groups, and then we'll start communicating that out to the groups that are participating, the various staff groups, the parent and community groups, students, and et cetera. So we're in the process of moving. They have the survey out to us that also goes out to the community. So as we communicate to those groups individually, and also when we put it out onto the website and onto our Facebook social media platforms, we'll be able to put the link for the survey too. So if people don't want to participate in a listening session, they certainly can just take the survey. And so we're moving pretty well there. So.
You're on.
I looked at Cindy, we have the second special meeting scheduled for next week on Wednesday, March 9th.
What time?
Same time, 5:30.
And we need a quorum.
Want to show of hands again, or?
Early to show
what are you
hands,
looking
but
for?
certainly,
I was gonna say, that is not a good date for me, but I can move things around if we don't have quorum.
I can make that.
Yeah, I'm good.
March
March
9th?
March 9th.
What time?
5:30.
I'm good.
Thank you.
We look.
I think we're.
That works, that works. Better than tomorrow. Yeah, that works.
Okay. We do not have any Board of Education correspondence at this time. Committee reports. Dylan, anything from you?
Nope.
Dan?
Nothing.
Terry?
No.
Nikki?
No.
Teresa?
We'll have curriculum next month on the 14th.
14th, yep.
I honestly don't know the topic off the top of my head. I just tried to
I'd have to
search
look
for it.
too.
I'm not sure, but there'll be a curriculum meeting on the 14th. Unless there's a finance, it might be moved a little bit depending on other meetings that happen.
Finance met this evening, went through January financials. That's all I have.
Phil? Cheryl? Okay. Any agenda items for future discussion? Liaison report. Sam is back but doesn't have any questions. Welcome back, Sam. Nobody here from the media this evening, so we'll be going into closed session. I would entertain a motion to enter into closed session per Wisconsin statutes 19.85 paren 1 paren C and paren E for the purpose of discussion of administrative contracts at 7:56. If somebody'd like to make that motion.
So moved.
Is that Cheryl?
Cheryl.
Got a motion by Terry and a second by Cheryl. Nikki, would you call the roll, please?
Yep. Nikki, yes. Dan?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Terry? Yes. Teresa?
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yes.
Dylan?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
Tim?
Okay. We will be closed and be back.